My mother said it right in front of me. We were all at the dinner table, plates full, everyone talking, and then her voice cut right through it all. Don't ask Renee for anything. She can barely pay her own rent. The table laughed, actually laughed. I was sitting right there, fork in my hand, smiling like it didn't hit me, like I hadn't heard it. My cousin leaned over close to my ear and whispered, "Is that true? Are you really that bad off?" I set my fork down slowly, took a breath, and I thought, if only they knew what was sitting in my name at First National Bank. But I said nothing. Not yet. My name is Renee Calloway. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how my family spent years writing me off and how my grandmother quietly made sure they would regret every single word. I'm not a flashy person. I never have been. I work as a freelance grant writer, which means I spend my days researching, writing proposals, and helping nonprofit organizations secure funding. It's not glamorous. Nobody at a dinner party gets excited when I explain what I do, but I'm good at it, really good, and I built that skill completely on my own. Growing up, I was the middle child, which, if you've been there, you already know what that means. My older sister Diane was the one they always praised. She was the prized child, the one who got the college fund, the car for her 16th birthday, the applause at every family gathering. My younger brother got the attention that came with being the baby, and I was just there, present, reliable, invisible. I put myself through community college working 2 part-time jobs. I never asked my mother for tuition money, never asked for help with my first apartment, never once called home saying I needed to be rescued. I just worked, quietly, consistently, for years. What the family didn't know was that for the past 2 years, I had been managing something much bigger than any of them could have guessed. Something that had nothing to do with them and everything to do with a woman who saw me clearly when no one else bothered to look. I wasn't loud, I wasn't showy, but I had been building something they couldn't imagine. If your family has ever talked about you like you weren't sitting right there in the room, I want you to hit that subscribe button right now. Drop your name in the comments. I see you. I know exactly how that silence feels, and I promise this story is for you. Click hype and let's go. 3 months before that dinner, my grandmother Eloise passed away. She was 81 years old, sharp until the very end, and the kind of woman who chose her words carefully and meant every single one of them. Her passing left a hole in my chest that I still haven't figured out how to fill. The family moved fast. Within 2 weeks of her funeral, the conversations had already started. Who would get the house? What about the property on the east side of town? What about her savings? My mother was at the center of all of it, and she made sure everyone knew it. She had been telling relatives for months, before anything was even official, that Grandma Eloise had been clear about her wishes. Eloise always said Renee meant well, but good intentions don't pay bills. She left the real assets to people who could use them. That was my mother, talking about me like I was a charity case, like my grandmother had looked at me and seen someone to pity rather than someone to trust. The estate gathering was set for a Saturday afternoon at my aunt's house. The family lawyer was coming to walk everyone through the basics before the formal reading. I drove there alone, parked down the street, and sat in my car for a moment, just breathing. Inside, the mood was almost celebratory. Diane was already there, dressed like she was attending an awards ceremony. My mother was holding court in the living room, her voice carrying down the hallway the moment I walked in. Eloise always said Renee meant well, but good intentions don't pay bills. She left the real assets to people who could use them. That was my mother, talking about me like I was a charity case, like my grandmother had looked at me and seen someone to pity rather than someone to trust. The estate gathering was set for a Saturday afternoon at my aunt's house. The family lawyer was coming to walk everyone through the basics before the formal reading. I drove there alone, parked down the street, and sat in my car for a moment, just breathing. Inside, the mood was almost celebratory. Diane was already there, dressed like she was attending an awards ceremony. My mother was holding court in the living room, her voice carrying down the hallway the moment I walked in. Eloise always said Renee meant well, but good intentions don't pay bills. She left the real assets to people who could use them. I heard it before I even reached the doorway. Diane looked up when she saw me and gave me a slow smile. "No offense, Renee. Grandma just knew us better." I didn't respond. I sat down in a chair near the window and looked at my hands. But here is what nobody in that room knew. Before the meeting started, the estate attorney, a quiet man named Mr. Hargrove, had pulled me aside in the hallway. He asked me to step outside for a moment, and in the span of about 4 minutes, standing on my aunt's front porch in the cold afternoon air, he told me something that changed everything. I already knew what was in the document, and it was nothing, not one single thing like what my mother had been telling people. I walked back into that room, sat back down, said nothing, but something had shifted inside me. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was still. And that stillness, it turned out, was the beginning of everything. The weeks that followed were a slow accumulation of small cuts, each one deliberate, each one wrapped in a smile. I found out, almost by accident, that the family had been holding meetings about Grandma Eloise's memorial garden and property arrangements for weeks, every Sunday. My mother's kitchen, Diane always there, my aunt, 2 cousins, no one had called me, not once. I found out because my aunt sent a group message with the wrong details and accidentally included my number. I stared at that message for a long time. The thread was full of plans and decisions and opinions, weeks' worth of conversation, and my name was nowhere in it. I called my mother that evening, calm, direct. "Mom, why haven't I been included in any of the estate planning discussions?" She paused just a beat too long before answering. "We didn't want to stress you out, honey. You have enough going on." That was it. That was the whole explanation. I have enough going on. Like I was too fragile to sit at a table and discuss my own grandmother's legacy. I said, okay. I hung up and I wrote it down in the Notes app on my phone. Date, time, what was said. I had started keeping records without even fully understanding why. 2 weeks later came the brunch. It was a Sunday at a cousin's house, and one of my mother's longtime friends was there. The kind of family friend who has known you since you were 7 and still asks what grade you're in. She went around the table asking everyone about their work. Diane talked for 4 minutes about her real estate business. My mother beamed beside her. When it got to me, my mother answered before I could open my mouth. "Renee does little writing jobs, freelance stuff. You know how it is." She waved her hand, literally waved her hand, and the table nodded the way people do when they've already heard enough and moved on to the next person. I sat there and felt the heat rise in my face, not from embarrassment, from something harder and quieter than that. I smiled, excused myself, walked outside, and sat in my car. 10 minutes, just me and the sound of the wind against the windshield. I made a decision in that car. I was done shrinking, done going quiet, done pretending I didn't notice. Then came the ask. My mother called me one evening and said she needed to talk privately. She came over, sat at my kitchen table, and folded her hands in front of her like she was about to do me a favor. "Renee, I need you to sign over any minor interest you might have in the estate, just to keep things simple and clean for the family." She said it smoothly, like it was nothing. "You're not really a property person," she continued. "Let us handle it. We'll take care of you." I looked at her for a long moment. I told her I needed time to think. She nodded, patted my hand, and left. And I found out later, through my cousin, who has never been good at keeping secrets, that my mother told Diane that same night, "She'll sign. She always goes along." She was wrong, but she didn't know that yet. What they didn't know was that Grandma Eloise had been watching all of us for years. She had made her decision a long time ago. Grandma Eloise and I had a relationship that existed almost entirely outside the family's line of sight. She called me every Sunday evening without fail. We talked for an hour sometimes, about my work, about her memories, about what she hoped the future would look like. She came to my apartment twice when her health was declining, small, quiet visits that I never mentioned to anyone because they felt sacred. She asked me questions the rest of the family never thought to ask. What do you want? What are you building? What do you need to get there? And I told her everything. 6 weeks before that estate gathering, a thick envelope had arrived at my apartment. It was from Mr. Hargrove's office. I set it on my kitchen counter and stood in front of it for a full minute before I opened it. Then I sat down and read it 3 times before I believed what it said. Grandma Eloise had updated her will 18 months before she died, quietly, privately, with full legal documentation. The deed to her primary property, valued at $3.8 million, had been transferred directly into my name. There was also a separate personal legacy fund. She had done it all without telling a single person in the family. I had a plan they never saw coming, and honestly, I didn't even need one. Grandma had already made the plan for me. About a week after my mother's visit, I received a phone call from a man named Gerald Tate. He was an attorney, older, calm, the kind of voice that makes you feel like the room just got steadier. He told me he had represented Grandma Eloise for over 20 years. He had been at the estate gathering, standing near the back, and he had heard my mother's conversation with me, including the request to sign. He got straight to the point. Do not sign anything. What your grandmother left you is fully protected, but only if you don't waive it. Gerald became the person I called when I didn't understand a clause, when I needed to know my rights, when I needed someone to look at a document and tell me what it actually meant. He was quiet and precise, and he had known my grandmother long enough to understand exactly what she had intended. While Gerald was walking me through the legal details, the rest of the family was moving forward like everything was already settled. My mother started talking about renovation plans. She told my aunt she was going to convert the property into a rental asset, split the income between herself and Diane. She was picking paint colors. Diane posted a photo on social media, a picture of the front of the property, and she captioned it, "Our Family's Future." My name was not in the post, not even as a comment. Nothing. I saw the post on a Thursday evening. I took a screenshot. I sent it to Gerald with a single message. It's time. The formal will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday at Mr. Hargrove's downtown office. My mother and Diane arrived together. They were dressed carefully, the kind of outfits that say, "We already know this is good news, and we want to look appropriate when we receive it." My mother was in the parking lot for almost 15 minutes before going in. I could see her from my car. She was talking, gesturing, probably rehearsing the gracious and humble way she planned to accept what she believed was already hers. Gerald was already inside when I arrived. He gave me a small nod from across the room. My mother glanced at him and then at me, a brief flash of something in her expression, then she straightened and smiled, like everything was perfectly normal. Mr. Hargrove opened the session at 2 o'clock. The room smelled of old paper and central heating. The chairs were dark wood and slightly uncomfortable. A clock on the wall ticked steadily behind Mr. Hargrove's voice as he began to read. Within 4 minutes, the room was completely silent. Not polite silence, stunned silence. The deed to Grandma Eloise's primary property, valued at $3.8 million, was assigned in full to one person, solely and entirely my name. Mr. Hargrove continued reading. A personal legacy fund of $210,000, added by a clause Grandma Eloise inserted 18 months before her death, was also directed to me. My mother's voice broke through the silence first. That has to be a mistake. Renee she wasn't close to her mother at all. Her voice cracked on the last word. Gerald spoke, steady, unhurried. There is no mistake. Mrs. Eloise updated this document herself. It has been verified and filed with the county recorder's office. Diane stood up. Her portfolio hit the table hard. She manipulated Grandma. She had to have. There is no other explanation. I had been sitting quietly through all of it, hands in my lap, back straight. When Diane said that, I finally spoke. Grandma called me every Sunday for 4 years. She came to my apartment twice when she was sick. She sat at my kitchen table and she asked me about my life, and she listened to every word I said. I paused. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew exactly who showed up. My mother reached across the table toward my arm. Gerald moved first, stepping between us smoothly, and gave Mr. Hargrove a nod to conclude the session. My mother was saying something, Diane was saying something. 2 cousins who had come as witnesses were whispering to each other near the door. The room had become a kind of controlled chaos, voices layering over each other, chairs shifting, papers rustling. I picked up the official deed copy from the table in front of me. I tucked it into my bag. I stood. I walked to the door. At the doorway, I stopped. I turned back one last time and looked at all of them. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I'm done being invisible." Then I walked out. Gerald filed the necessary responses within the week. There was a brief, formal challenge submitted by my mother's attorney, a letter full of the kind of language designed to sound serious while saying very little. Gerald handled it without drama. The documentation was clean. The transfer had been executed properly and completely. There was no ground to stand on, and everyone involved knew it. The property was mine. I didn't make any quick decisions. I gave myself 3 full months before I made a single move. I needed to sit with it, to understand what I actually wanted, rather than just reacting to what had happened. My mother called twice during that period. The first time I let it go to voicemail. The second time I answered. She talked for several minutes, her voice moving between justification and something that sounded almost like an apology but never quite arrived there. When she finished, I said, "I hope you're well, Mom." Then I ended the call. Diane sent me a long message. It was detailed and thorough, and it blamed my grandmother's attorney, her own grief, my deliberate manipulation, the universe in general, and everyone except herself. I read it once. Then I closed my phone and went back to a proposal I was finishing for a client. There are things I've thought about a lot since all of this happened. I spent so many years trying to prove something to people who had already made up their minds about me. I adjusted myself, stayed quiet, stayed small, tried not to take up too much space at tables where I was clearly not wanted. And none of it changed how they saw me. Not once. But Grandma Eloise never needed convincing. She just needed time to make it official. The bank didn't give me anything. Grandma gave me what she always believed I already was: worthy. If someone in your family tried to pressure you into signing away what was rightfully yours, or made you feel like you didn't deserve a seat at the table where your own future was being decided, I want to hear your story. Seriously, drop it in the comments right now. Tell me how your family used money or property or legacy to make you feel like you were less than. You don't have to carry that alone, and you don't have to be quiet about it anymore. This community is here. Click hype to help this story reach everyone who has ever been counted out of their own family's legacy. Staying silent while the people who were supposed to protect you dismiss everything you are, that is one of the hardest things a person can carry. If you've been there, you know. Subscribe and become a part of this community, because you deserve to be somewhere that actually sees you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and it reminds me that none of us are as alone as our families sometimes make us feel. Click hype to let this story travel to someone who needs it tonight. You showed up today, and honestly, that already makes you different.